I figured I'd do a couple videos today since I got a lot of stuff to do. This is Roxanne, and she seems to have developed a little bit of an oil leak somewhere that I can't find. I just smell it slightly a little bit. Okay, so I smell it slightly whenever I run the car kind of hard, which I don't know. I like to play. I don't know if I'm putting this car to its full potential, but I had this stored at my buddy's place because I have a couple cars that are painted that I don't really want to have here at the shop because I can't really trust everybody to leave my cars unmolested over here, to say the least. So anyways, I gotta change the skid plate on this because I was hauling butt on a road I wasn't exactly used to driving down, and there was a dip in the road that I hit, and I put a dent in the skid plate, and I don't know if exactly where the dent is. Might have hurt the oil pan, but that's what the skid plate's for. And the skid plate isn't caved in, it just has a dent in it, a scrape in the front. I don't know if you can see it because there's oil on it, but I know these cars are prone to transmission line failures. I wouldn't say complete failures, just leaking lines. So I'll show you on the blue pork over here what lines I think might be the culprit. It's these lines down here that are already leaking on this, because this is the 3.7 liter Ford Taurus Interceptor, and those lines actually go to, they just kind of curve around and go back down. This is their version of like a kind of a tranny cooler deal, and then they come back up to this, which goes to the cooler in the front. Either that or it goes through the radiator. This doesn't have the radiator anymore, and that looks suspiciously like a mount that goes to the radiator. But what's nice about having this car here, it only has about 70 or 80,000 miles on it. It's a 3.7 non-turbo, which for some reason the non-turbo cars are more prone to these lines and fittings leaking. The only thing I can think of is that if you have a lack of power to a transmission, it causes more strain on the transmission because the transmission is compensating for the lack of power by multiplying the torque that is available from the back of the crank and flywheel to the transmission and drivetrain. A kind of example is like if you had a stick shift car or truck, and either you put a whole lot of weight in it, and you would have to ride the clutch more to get the vehicle moving initially, or if you had the vehicle unloaded but you had, say, a dead cylinder or an engine that was lacking horsepower, well, or torque, well, you'd have to ride the clutch a little bit more to make do to get moving with the lack of power because of the engine having a fault, or lack of power that you need for the weight that you're putting on it. So you're actually modulating the torque and power that's coming from the engine into the transmission manually by a clutch. So you're riding the clutch to allow that transfer of power to be regulated until you can completely allow the clutch to engage the transmission to the engine. So I think because these cars have the same transmission and drivetrain, or not drivetrain because the engine is part of the drivetrain, but the actual transmission and drive lines, which is the driveline system, since these have less power, I think these have like about 305 horsepower. I don't have any idea what the torque is on them. I could probably find it if I looked on the window sticker, but I think the window sticker is, oh, I can get to it here. I don't know if this tells the horsepower, but this car actually came with the window sticker. I don't know if it shows the horsepower, but it does show what engine it has in it, which is a 3.7 Duratec Cyclone motor, which has 305 horsepower, going through the same drive lines and transmission or transaxle as the twin turbo, but the twin turbo has almost 400 horsepower stock, so the transmission doesn't have to do as much work. It sounds funny, but putting more power to a transmission is actually better for it to a point, because it doesn't have to multiply the torque and go under as much strain to make use of the torque that's available, because there is more torque available. So it's not trying to multiply the torque, it's more or less just using the torque to go straight through the drive, from the engine through the drivetrain to the wheels. So this one very well might have some leaks there, but I can tell the difference between the smell of hot transmission fluid opposed to hot ATF. They both have a distinctive odor to them that are different. So if I ended up doing some damage to the oil pan, or maybe I hit the oil filter, I couldn't see how, but these cars I can't say are as durable by any means as the and this strap here isn't to hold the bumper up. This is when I went to the racetrack, they want to have a tow point for you to be able to hook to in case you slide off the track and wreck, or if you get stuck. And most of the time when you race on a track, or you're practicing on the track doing hot laps or whatever, they tell you if you get one or two wheels off of the track, even 3 wheels off of the track, you know, you can carry on and continue your driving. But they tell you if you end up with all 4 wheels off the track, they would prefer that you stop and wait for a quarter marshal or a track official or a track vehicle to come out and check everything over, because that's their kind of way of inspecting the vehicle, a secondary inspection, to make sure that there isn't something wrong with the car, and also so that you don't drag a bunch of dirt onto the track surface, because you're going through a heavy amount of dirt. And more than likely, if you've gone off the track with 4 wheels, you've kicked dirt up. So it's a multiple purpose consideration for the track, for your vehicle, and the safety of everybody, for you to get your car checked out, them to see what debris is on the track, and make sure you're not spinning the tires and digging holes right off the side of the track that somebody else would hit. And if they were sliding sideways after going off the track at high speed, and there was a couple ruts in the dirt near the track, that's a pretty good chance to catch the sidewall of a tire or a wheel and either pop it off of the rim, or even cause the vehicle to roll. So that's what that strap is for. It looks horrible because it's just a piece of seatbelt, but I didn't have any place. If this had the push bar on it, which is what these holes, no, I think those holes are just for marker lights. I think the push bar actually goes through and under here. I don't remember. I think there's little lights in there that would normally come with the police car. It was a police car. I think the actual push bar just comes through a couple of the holes already, and these holes goes under the bumper. I don't remember. But anyways, that's what that strap is for. So anyways, it's nice to have another car all together because even though these have two different displacement engines, both of the actual engine blocks are the same. This one's just considered the EcoBoost, which is a 3.5 liter with twin turbos, and a lot of extra stuff. And this one here is a normally aspirated, which they call an NA 3.7, but the blocks are the same and the oil pan's the same. And I don't think the cylinder heads are the same. I think they're both DTI motors, which is direct injection, which I don't like because I don't know if you hear the stories about them, especially turbo cars have a lot of blow-by because just the nature of the design. They do use exhaust pressure to spin the turbo impeller to in turn produce the boost to run the turbos. But when the turbos blow off or the pressure isn't there to run them, then you get a charge or a vacuum bleed of boost is positive pressure and vacuum, of course, is negative atmosphere. That's where, like, a vacuum cleaner would be, of course, the vacuum side where intake and fuel is getting pulled through. A turbo would be like a leaf blower. So what happens is on a DTI motor, the fuel is injected directly into the combustion chamber after the valve train. So what happens is a vehicle with excessive blow-by, which even a new engine has blow-by when it has a turbo. If you don't put a catch can on one of these, which it takes the vapor that's left over that might have oil atomized inside of it, that ends up building up on the inside of the cylinder head where the valves are, and can produce carbon, which is burnt oil vapor, and it doesn't have any way to go away unless you do like a seafoam treatment or actually take the engine apart, where you have a normally or conventional either fuel injector or carbureted engine. The fuel actually goes into either somewhere on the intake manifold or close to the or like a valve body. This doesn't have any fuel that goes in through this. This is almost like a tunnel ram because it's a high performance engine. So this is what they used to have on high performance engines, was a tunnel ram. And the fuel would go into here either through carburetors or an intake or injectors if it was a fuel injected motor. So the fuel would go through it, then go to the top of the valves and valve train, then go into the combustion chamber. Well, that fuel by itself helps clean the system unless the mixture is too rich. Well, an engine like this is never going to have a rich mixture unless it's intentional for warming it up. But even then, the fuel never goes through any of these components here. It gets directly injected right down into the combustion chamber after the valve train. So unfortunately, the valve train never gets any cleaning process from fuel going through it. No fuel goes through this. So that causes problems. So where you might get a Crown Victoria or even I don't know if a Dodge Charger police or stock Dodge Charger has a DTI engine or not. I don't remember. I know Volkswagens have DTI, but they're diesels, and diesels don't necessarily, I think, have a bunch of carbon deposits because of the whole, plus, well, the engine is always turbocharged on a diesel these days, but I don't remember hearing about carbon buildup in a diesel. But I don't know much about diesels. But a non-DTI engine, like in a Crown Victoria, which is a fuel-injected engine, which is the 4.6, which is actually quite a bit bigger than these engines. Like this is 3.5. You go to a 4.6, you're talking about a whole more than a liter, and this is a 3.7, so you've got just a little, close to a liter difference on a Crown Victoria compared to even a non-turbo Ford Taurus Police Interceptor. And another little bit of trivia is that a 3.7 motor like this, you can't get in a Taurus, a regular Taurus, a civilian Taurus. The 3.7 motor only comes in a police or Ford Interceptor sedan, patrol sedan, which is basically the Ford Taurus Police Interceptor, or the Ford Explorer Police Interceptor, which is called the Ford Interceptor Patrol Utility. So they don't want to put police in the name anymore, even though they have the Police Interceptor logo on the cars. But I'm going off on another tangent there. So these engines, once they get about 100,000 miles on them, which is what the actual whole valve train and engine is usually warranted for the original owner. I don't think for police, but for civilian use, most of the components that are in one of these cars, like the spark plugs, they don't want you to change the spark plugs for 100,000 miles. On the Ford Crown Victoria Police Interceptor, they have regular service intervals and change the plugs and the coil packs. But those engines, you can put 300, 400,000 miles on them before you have any problems. And the problems, you end up with carbon buildup and debris is actually in the valve body, because the fuel goes in after. I say valve body? Oh yeah, it's about, the throttle body, sorry. Throttle body on a conventional, non-aspirated, normally aspirated, I'm not good at remembering all these terms, but a normally aspirated non-turbo engine that is not DTI gets all its fuel right here at the throttle body, or if it's tune port injection, it still gets the fuel going in at the base of the throttle body. So vehicles that are tune port injection actually have more buildup up here that doesn't get cleaned by fuel, but there isn't any fuel here that's unburnt, so if they run rich, it's not a big deal. Again, this car and this car over here, anything that's DTI, there's no fuel going through this system here. It is specifically just for air, controlled air volume. So these engines at about 100,000 miles to 150,000 miles will produce some carbon buildup actually on the valve train and valves inside the cylinder head, unless you put a catch can. I've been trying to get a catch can for it, but you can't put them on California vehicles, which is silly because this car here, if you look, actually is not for sale in states with California emission standards at all. Government agencies can get them, but you can't even buy a Ford Taurus Police Interceptor with the EcoBoost twin turbo in it at a dealer in California, new. You could buy it used, say, I think it would need to have like 3,500 miles or something like that, or 35,000. Then you could buy it used for in California, because for some reason that alleviates the stipulation. So these are kind of a rare car to have in California. And I got this one with literally like 29,000 miles originally, just around 40,000 miles. 29,000 miles, just around 30,000 miles. Now it has about 41,000, maybe 42,000 miles. So I actually got it before it was technically supposed to be even brought into the California. But I waited also. There's a time period too. I think it's a certain amount of miles and a certain amount of years that these cars are allowed to be purchased in California in the police edition. You can get a factory brand new Ford Taurus SHO, which is a twin turbo EcoBoost, in California. I don't know if you have to if they're specifically for California and have the California emissions on them. So I don't know if you can buy an out-of-state Ford Taurus SHO from out of state, brand new. If you were to buy it out of state and bring it in to California, you might have to go get it refereed like I did this. This car actually had to take it to the local college that had a referee station, and they charged me $8.25 for a certificate and didn't charge me anything else. But none of the other small shops would touch it, and I don't know why, because even the guy at the referee station kind of laughed. He says, there's no reason for them not to let this go through. It's just federally mandated for whatever stipulations at some point that California did. So, California has their own little critiques and rules. As I've always said, since I ever heard it, is that California is basically like some kind of health food cereal. There's a bunch of fruits and nuts and the rest is just flakes. So anything they can find a way to keep you from having and using something that any other state can have, as long as they can charge you some money for it, they're going to do it. So that all said, this one doesn't have this has the same motor basically as the twin turbos. And I do have another twin turbo car that I could use for parts, but valve drivetrain, mechanically speaking, that car is completely fine. It's just that one that got crushed by a big rig in Wyoming, which is both these cars are from Wyoming. But so this is a little video a little thing that's developed on this car, which is why I'm here at the shop today. And I figure, while I'm letting this thing cool down because I was driving it, I'll work on Vixen. And I discovered what the catastrophe was evolving to happen, which I luckily was able to avoid just by seeing an accident on the side of the 10 freeway in Banning, because pretty sure if I'd have driven over the mountain through Lambs Canyon and all those curves and braking, I might have ended up with a three-wheeler or even just a two-wheeler skidding off into the abyss, because there's a lot of nasty drop-offs on the sides of the road, and no telling who else I would have taken with me in an accident like that, especially with such a heavy car. But one thing to keep in mind, if you ever buy one of these Ford Taurus Police Interceptors with the twin turbo, or even the normally aspirated 3.5, which they do make this motor without turbos, or the 3.7 that's normally aspirated. They are a DTI motor, and they have their little quirks and hiccups and drawbacks. So I don't expect one of these cars to be bought at an auction with 100,000 miles to 120,000 miles on it, and you to be able to go get another 120 to another even 200,000 or 300,000 miles out of them like you would a Crown Victoria. Crown Victorias get bought all the time at auctions with like 150,000 miles on them. And then taxi cab companies and security companies will put another 150 to 200, even 300,000 miles. I've seen 400,000 mile and 500,000 mile Crown Victoria Police Interceptors still running, driving, getting smogged, and being used to cart people all over the place when they're drunk, lazy, or don't want to drive the car. So if you buy one of these, that's a second party. All these cars I have are I'm the second owner. I bought them all from the original owner. The auction I buy these cars through, that I'm probably not going to deal with anymore because they've changed a lot of rules, and they're just, I've always bought these cars directly from Fleet Services or the police department or water and power, electric company, something, whatever department they were originally bought and used for, government agency or federal or state or city-wide use. These cars are still registered as a federal vehicle, and when I get the registration and paperwork on them, it's funny, they have expiration dates of like 2099, which is longer than I'll ever live. I mean, it's going to be 2020 here in about a month. And I get these cars with paperwork on them, and the sometimes, very rarely, they have the government plates on them. This one came with it, and I had another one, and I don't know, they just didn't think it through, I guess, when they cleaned this car out and sold it. It's kind of a neat thing to have. I'm not going to use it, but yeah, these cars are not going to be those 300,000 and 400,000 mile cars without some major maintenance, modifications, or repairs. And this is the same engine that comes in a lot of Mazda SUVs and cars. Ford and Mazda are very close knit, to say the least, if you don't know that. Since there's Lincolns, I don't know if there's Mercurys anymore. I don't know if Mercury's still around. But it used to be Ford, Lincoln, Mercury. We're all in cahoots with each other. There's probably another brand along with that. But Mazda and Ford, I think Isuzu and Chevy are together. Mazda and Ford, and I think Jaguar and Ford. I think Maserati is a Ford also. These engines, don't be surprised if you get a chance to have to do some repairs on them. And when I say get a chance, because it's going to happen. If you go to look up parts for a Ford with this engine in it, and the price seems a little astronomical, go ahead and check. They can cross-reference at any website that sells parts. If you buy the parts for the Mazda vehicle that has the same engine and the same components you need, literally the price is almost half. Ford is very proud of their parts, and Mazda not so much. The only reason that Mazda and Ford got together because Mazda used to make their rotary pickup trucks and Ford used to make their gas pickup trucks, and they also had the like the Ford Courier. When the Ford Courier was out, that was a smaller version of a pickup truck when mini trucks first started coming into the States, or being available in the States. But Mazda, from out of the country, had the rotary trucks, but they also wanted to sell an economical mini truck. Well, they weren't getting many bites with the American demographic of buying American. So what they did is they made a deal with Ford to make the Mazdas Ford Couriers initially, and still used the Mazda engines, but had the Ford body on them. And then they went back to the B2000, but originally the first Ford Couriers out were same body, same configuration, except for engines, as the Mazda. So the Mazda and the Ford, Mazda, I think B2000 was the first one. I don't remember. But the Mazda B2000 had a Mazda engine in it, and the Ford Courier had the Pinto Ford engine in it. Well, they've stuck with that for a long time now. Now both cars are actually identical. Like if you get a Ford Explorer back in the day, or a Mazda, I think it's called a Navajo, which is a Ford Explorer body and everything. One of them had the Ford engine, one of them had the Mazda engine, and then a lot of vehicles now, the Mazda and the Ford are the identical vehicle. Just kind of like a Toyota Corolla and a Geo Prism. Geo is also Chevrolet. So Toyota and Chevrolet are shaking hands. Of course, Toyota and Lexus are the same company. But that's just stuff in case anybody wants to know if they want to get involved with owning these cars. There are a lot of quick and easy ways to save some money, but the only reason those circumstances exist or opportunities exist is because a lot of companies are mismatching themselves with other companies to grow and provide a same type of vehicle to a whole different market. And some companies just want more money, just like a Cadillac compared to a Chevy. a Cadillac is a Chevrolet. If you go buy a Cadillac part for an engine, I don't know if there's any North Star engines per se in like a standard Buick or Pontiac or Oldsmobile, which I think Pontiac and Oldsmobile are gone now. I think even Buick is gone now. But if you had an older car that was a Cadillac and it had the same engine as like a Pontiac Bonneville or an Oldsmobile Delta 88 or a Chevy Cavalier or Malibu, front-wheel drive Malibu, those all have the same engine, and you're going to spend less money on parts for the same engine, just as long as you don't have the title of Cadillac on it. So it's just a couple tidbits, advantages to knowing that stuff, and knowing more about the police interceptors. These cars actually aren't even going to be available anymore after 2000. I think they stopped making these cars in this year, or the model years that are being sold for 2000, and Tauruses are just going to be gone. So are a lot of other four-door sedans that Ford makes. They've just decided to pull out of the full-size sedan market. They're going to make Mustangs and little Econo boxes and trucks, and that's it. So this car is actually getting more rare as we speak. I've got 3 of these Tauruses that are all police interceptors, and you're never going to see another Ford Taurus police interceptor on the road after 2000. Well, you will, but I'd say after 2025, which is, these cars roughly are in service for about 5 to 6 years, if they're lucky. So maybe by 2025, maybe 2026, you might not see these cars any longer at all on the road as police interceptors. They'll all be a retired car or a small department that hasn't put a bunch of miles on it. By probably 2030, you won't see any of them at all, except privately owned, public surplus cars, or wherever you get them at an auction. But again, I don't buy them at an auction. I go through an online auction that connects me with the actual first owner. All these cars are single owner cars before I bought them. I bought them from the original owner, which was the police department, and then other vehicles I have, they're single owner cars bought from, whatever electrical company, organization, federal organization, water and power. So it's nice to know that nobody else has had the car, even though there's probably been like 20 or 30 different police officers driving them on a regular basis. But it's kind of good to know these things. I'm learning about it as we speak, and lo and behold, I'm not buying any more of these. They do have a special service edition